Hello and welcome to, excuse me, my pre-summer holiday live show, or maybe you're already on your summer holiday. Hang on, let me just kill the volume on this iPad because it's disrupting. Anyway, yeah, maybe you're on your holiday, or maybe you've had your holiday. But anyway, I have recently been off to the Far East, and on that trip, I was opening our fantastic new data center, and in launching that new data center, I got to meet a lot of very interesting people, and many of those people asked me some quite fundamental questions. So I thought I would do a live show that was kind of dedicated to sort of like the real kind of nitty gritty basics of exactly what EPM is. And really there were kind of five kind of questions that I was asked time and time again. So I thought maybe I would go over those five questions today. This event will be recorded for posterity, and so therefore, hopefully, you're watching this back later on. You'll be able to find out those questions, and hopefully, I'll do a good job of giving you the answers. Right then, so as usual, disclaimer, I've got lots of screens and transitions to figure out, so I'm going to do my very best to remember to switch to the right screens and remember what to do, but I'm just going to have to do the best, so if I forget to do something, then I apologise. But anyway, let's get stuck in then and start with the presentation. Right, so I guess a very good place to start would be to click on my slideshow thing. Where's my mouse pointer gone? There it is. So just to welcome you all here again to my Zero Crust channel. This is Zero Trust Talk without the hard bits. And really, basically, so let's get into that first question, which a kind of fundamental one, which is, what is endpoint privilege management, or termed EPM? So really, endpoint privilege management tooling, as I can like to call it, addresses the issue of either overprivilege or underprivilege on a user's endpoint, and that can result in either security and or productivity challenges. So an EPM enables you to give just the right amount of admin, perhaps even just a single unique app, or for just the right user at just the right time, and perhaps even just the right amount of time. And in addition to control, you also have complete clarity of privilege usage in the auditing, and so with your auditors, so you can keep an eye on things. So really, I had to think about all this, and I thought I would, for some of those out there that maybe aren't quite aware of all of this stuff about privilege, go right back to the basics and just do a real basic look at what privileged use and non-privileged use looks like. So this is where I'm going to have to switch to another system, and it might all go slightly pear-shaped, but anyway, let me try and switch to my system here. So this really is about privileged and non-privileged use. So you should see the desktop of my laptop here, and I'm logged into this laptop with full privileges. So if I was to go to the local admin group, for example, I would see my user pool in the local admin group. There you go. And basically, as a fully privileged user, I can do pretty much what I like. I can, run command prompt as admin. I can run, I can install Java. I can install anything I like, really. I can do what I like on this system. I can even, run tools like, procmon, that can, as admin. Actually, I probably should run that as admin. So right click, run as administrator, just to prove to you that we are totally privileged. And I can kill tasks. I can probably cause quite a lot of mayhem. Also, if I go into my control panel, let's do that. I should be able to go into my network adapters and start messing around with, with adapters, because I've got full privilege to do everything really. And this is kind of like in the old days, how you would get your laptop. You'd be the admin of your laptop, and that was considered okay, because you just had to do the stuff you needed to get to do. Okay. Obviously, times change, and the problem with overprivilege like this is that in addition to the kind of management issues of letting users kind of go crazy on their laptops, you've also got the problem of ransomware, malware, in that if you were to download something which was malicious and you happen to be logged into the system as a full administrator, then basically that thing that you're running is going to be fully privileged as well, and that's going to mean that it can spread laterally, and that is a major problem. So I guess the general thinking was to remove privileges from users. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just do a quick delete here. So this is going to remove me from the local admin group. So if we go here, you'll see that my user is no longer, and I'm going to have to log out and log in. So that's fine. So I'm going to just sign out and then sign back in, hopefully with a PIN code. So I'm now logging into this system as a completely non-privileged user. Okay, so that should mean that if I was to go to the, let's just do a check here. So net local group administrators. And by the way, Admin By Request is not on this system. It's a completely vanilla system. It's just completely, so if I was to try to run something as admin, you'll see I now get a different prompt, which is the, and so I can't run things now as admin. I'm going to get that consent for credential prompt, and I can't put in my username here. So Paul H at t1-teamabr.com. I think that is right. I should get an error saying I don't have privileges. Okay, so that just gives you a really, really kind of basic view of what a fully privileged system looks like, and the challenges with that, in that you can pretty much do what you like, and there's problems with control. And then you have the non-privileged system, which basically gives you the opposite, better security, but absolutely no abilities to do anything. So what comes after kind of fully privileged or non-privileged for many people? Well, it actually would be privileged local groups and the use of things called something called MS Lap. So you may or may not remember, depending on how old you are. I certainly do. Microsoft introduced the concept of power users. So this is a privileged local group from, I think, Windows 2000, and it ran all the way, I think, to XP. And by making someone a power user, it was basically a very early form of privilege management, because you were not an administrator, but power users gave you the ability to do stuff with control panel. So that's still quite a lot of privilege, but it didn't give you the rights to to run specific applications as admin. So it was, in a way, a sort of very basic early form of privilege management. That has been discontinued now, so the power users group actually doesn't do anything anymore if you find yourself in it, although it does cause some issues. I guess the nearest thing would be the network configuration operators group. So that is a sort of a kind of mini privilege management, and what those two things do really is they give you, or enable the administrator to give someone permanent partial privileges. Okay, so that's kind of the one way of dealing with the problem in network configuration operators group. And then you've got the use of something called Microsoft Labs. So Microsoft Labs is kind of like the other end of the scale, which is temporary, permanent, or temporary full privileges. So that means that you're going to be able to give someone a temporary full administrator, and with that full administrator account, you'll be able to do pretty much whatever you like. So there's two things here. You can either give someone like a permanent partial, or you can give someone a temporary full privilege count, and that really is sort of what goes on today for those people out there that don't have good privilege management on their systems. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just show you what a modern workplace EPM tool looks like, and of course I'm going to be using Admin By Request for this. So what I'm going to do, the system that I'm using here is it doesn't have Admin By Request on it, so I'm basically going to just go ahead and install it. So if I just click on here, I think I've got downloaded earlier. So basically, I think this is the one. I'm going to just install my own demo tenant, not the Singapore one. So I'll be able to tell that by going to the tray icon when it pops up. There it is, it's red, so it's signifying that I'm a full admin, and you can see I'm in my right demo tenant. Okay, good. Okay, so there's one more thing I'm going to do. So normally Admin By Request would revoke you if you've got it configured to revoke, but I don't have that, so I'm going to essentially just revoke myself. I'm going to log out and log in again. Okay, so that would be again net local group administrators, and that would be Azure AD Paul Hewson delete. Just double check that's gone. Correct. And now I'm going to log out. Finally, we should be able to show you the modern workplace EPM tooling as I had configured it for this demo, but I had unfortunately installed the wrong agent, so that was a mistake on my behalf. Apologies for that, but let us get the icon, the green icon, and I can show you some things. Okay, here we go. Right, so now we should have green icon, and we got the correct agent installed. And then, right, so the Java, so I configured a blocking rule for that. So I can prevent users from, if I had a lapse password, I could just do what I liked. So we can control, what users can do with their admin rights. And I'm blocking it in this case. I'm putting a custom message in here, but I could also got the option to allow the user a one-time bypass with a PIN code. I could also allow the user to run, for example, Process Explorer, which is quite a useful thing to run for some people. Means I can, perhaps if I'm a developer, I can sort of kill tasks and stuff. But Process Explorer has the ability to allow users to run commands from it. But I can block sub-processes because, again, that is all part of effective endpoint privilege management. And also we have something called tray tools. So these are things that allow users to configure. Remember we talked about the network configuration operators group before. We can give users the ability to change, reconfigure their network settings without needing to put them in that group, which is obviously a permanent partial group. And also when we're doing things with our network settings here, these would all be fully audit logged in the portal as well. So that gives you a slightly rather extended, sneaky peek at an EPM. So we looked at the full privilege, we looked at no privilege, we looked at privileged local groups, and now we've had a look at how a modern workplace EPM tooling system can create what is essentially the perfect balance between productivity, allowing users to do what they need to do, but also the security aspect of it, that we can restrict. And using something like Admin By Request, you can create an unlimited number of different profiles that would enable you to create just the right type of admin for just the right bunch of users. Anyway, so we're going to move on, thankfully, and hopefully no more mishaps from me. Sorry about that. But anyway, we're going to carry on now to what is basically question number 2, which is another kind of corker, which is PAM versus EPM, and what is the difference. And so really this is, in a way they're sort of the same thing, but they're sort of not. And it's all about the perception of what people think a PAM is. And also maybe they've never heard of the terminology of EPM before. And if you're from the kind of Gartner world, you probably would use a different term. We're going to see that right now. So basically, I just need to get rid of me for a second. So yeah, what is a privileged access management system? So it's a tool that provides elevated level of technical access through the management protection of accounts, credentials, and commands. Okay, and part of Zero Trust. And Gartner, they have four different categories of basically what makes a PAM solution. So you've got the privileged accounts, the PASM system. Okay, this is really what PAM was created in the first place. Was all about allowing management of privileged accounts. Okay, so that would be privileged accounts for things like servers and infrastructure or anything. If you weren't an admin, you would basically get access to a privileged account, and you'd be using a PAM with a PASM functionality. And that meant that the PAM had to store those privileged accounts, and that means it needs a vault. The next type of solution Gartner categorizes as PAM is a PEDM. Okay, so this is essentially an EPM. So it's a host-based system that manages privileges on that host itself. Okay, so it's not giving you access to any other system, privileges on other systems. It just gives you privileges on that system you're actually working with. So on the endpoint, hence the term endpoint privilege management. Okay, very different from PASM, because actually with the endpoint privilege management, the user uses their existing credentials. So they're non-privileged credentials, just like you've seen here that I've done today. I'm using my non-privileged credentials to perform a specific privileged actions. Okay, so therefore we're not needing a fully privileged account, and therefore we don't need a password vault, because we're not actually using privileged accounts. And actually there's another sort of kind of bonus question here, which is, why isn't Admin By Request in the Gartner Magic Quadrant? So Magic Quadrant is essentially a collection of vendors that Gartner would have in a certain category, in which case it would be PAM. And Gartner select the top vendors in the category, and they put them in the Magic Quadrant, top left, top right, challengers, niche, whatever, leaders, and they would place you on this grid. And it's certainly been noticed by many that Admin By Request does not feature on the Magic Quadrant. And the reason why that is the case is that it's kind of like a bit of a technicality, in that when you apply with Gartner in that PAM category, you have to fulfill certain requirements, and one of those requirements is password vaulting. Now, Gartner themselves state that PEDM/EPM solutions do not need password vaulting. However, they make password vaulting a condition of being, in their eyes, a PAM. And therefore, to be in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, you need to have password vaulting, even if you're a PEDM, and even if Gartner say that being a PEDM EPM, you do not need a password vault. And Gartner themselves actually state that passwordless, which is what a PEDM EPM is sort of the future, and credentials are sort of legacy. And ideally, we need to be moving towards a passwordless, systems. But we're sort of in a bit of a position here, because we don't need password vaulting, and therefore we're just not allowed into the category. So if ever you want to know, or any of you want to know why we're not in that Magic Quadrant, it's simply down to the fact that we don't do password vaulting, because we don't need to do it. All the other requirements, number of customers, size, all that kind of stuff, we meet all those. It's just simply down to the fact that we do not have a password vault, because we do not need a password vault, and Gartner state that is how it should be. EPMs do not need password vaulting. Okay, so let's go on to the next category, which is the secrets management, and then we have finally the cloud, cloud entitlement management, which is all about governance and managing types of when you go into your cloud dashboards, giving people access to certain things in your cloud kind of infrastructure and your cloud systems. So you can see very much the PASM, the secrets management, and the CIEM. These are all things that require credentials to access to do privileged actions on other things. And the odd one out there really is the PEDM, because the PEDM is something which is really just managing privilege on the endpoint. And that's really, how Admin By Request EPM fits in. Okay. So, we've talked a little bit about PAM. So, a brief history of PAM. It did originate back in the 2000s, and as we've mentioned, it was designed originally for the control and monitoring of privileged credentials for admin accounts, like network servers and directory systems and backup systems and database systems. So you would need to get yourself a privileged account, and to do that, you would need to have that account rotated, and you'd have to go and fetch that from a PAM solution. Okay, that was deemed at the time the most important thing. You didn't want anyone getting access to the magic key to all your stuff. So you need to make sure that your privileged accounts were all properly managed. Okay, local privilege management at that time was considered not so important, because it is really talking about the user's privileges locally on the endpoint. It doesn't mean that user can't do anything on any other system. So it's really kind of like a isolated privilege management on the endpoint. So it wasn't really thought of at that time as being as important. Okay, so really, how do we explain then, PAM, EPM, and EPM tooling? So really, what happened is that as PAM systems evolved, so as PASM systems evolved, they did eventually come around and decide that they needed to get EPM functionality on their PAM systems, but it was very much something that was added on as a kind of later, and it could even have been, in many of the cases this has happened, it's been acquired in later on as a sort of, they've bought a company that had a solution and they've sort of, inverted commas, integrated it in. So let's have a look at the sort of differences between a PAM solution that's got like an EPM as a kind of add-on, and a specialist EPM tool, which is what I would view Admin By Request as, because that is kind of what we were designed to do from day one. So so as I mentioned, your PAS and PAM, the EPM is going to be an add-on. With a specialist EPM tool, it's been EPM a pedant from day one. So it's only ever done that specific job, and that in itself should tell you something. So as I mentioned as well, it's acquired, usually your PAM vendor that had the PASM would have acquired an EPM as an add-on or as an acquisition, rather than develop it themselves, whereas EPM tooling was likely developed, as is the case with Admin By Request, developed in-house just by us. So being part of a legacy PAM is going to be likely difficult and disruptive implementation, because just PAM, big legacy PAM systems, that's just what they are. If you want an EPM and you buy one as part of a legacy PAM, you'd be prepared for exactly this. However, if you went down the route of a specialist EPM tooling system, you're going to get something which is very easy to understand and configure. Obviously, a legacy PAM is going to be complex and expensive, and obviously the opposite would be the case of a specific EPM tool. And I think the speed of deployment and usability are very important here. And the legacy PAM is going to have the EPM as being only one feature out of many. So when you need to get support from that product, you're having to go find someone that is going to help you with that one particular product of many, and you're not getting very focused support. Whereas I'd say with EPM, you're getting modern passwordless design. Yeah, so I think these sort of nicely explain the difference between going down the route of a kind of legacy PAM with an EPM add-on, and then or choosing a specialist EPM tooling system. Okay, the next little cracker of a question that I was asked on my recent trip to the Far East, on-prem or non-prem, do you have an on-prem version? Should we run this on-prem or should we run it non-prem? Jeff, tell me, what situation there? Okay, well, first of all, admission, I, before Admin By Request, used to run a hosting company before cloud was around, really, and that's showing my age a bit. And basically, I was absolutely in love with racks, full stack. I used to implement from an empty cabinet all the way from the power, diverse power, all the way from SAN storage to hypervisors, to front end, edge firewalls, and all clustering and all that kind of stuff. I love all that stuff, and I can build all that stuff, and I'm very, very familiar, with on-prem, and the kind of pros and cons of on-prem. So if we look at the kind of taking EPM out of it for one moment, just right now, let's just talk about the benefits and considerations of doing something on-prem these days, right? Well, of course, if you have on-prem, you've got full control of all your data, okay, and secure as well. If you're the downside of that is obviously the kind of buck stops with you. There's no one else to blame if there's a breach. It's just you. So it's kind of you do take full responsibility if there's a breach. Now obviously you take, if you have full control, you do take responsibility of it. So some people might like that, but I'm just saying that is sort of like an obvious downside. You don't have any data sovereignty issues because you've got all the data there on your premises. But obviously you still have to run that infrastructure, and that's not cheap. You have full control of change management, so everything in your setup you can control, and so if anything changes, anything gets patched, you know exactly when it's going to happen. But you are dependent on being able to source really good skilled IT staff to handle all that for you. You can go shopping for the perfect vendor that absolutely suits exactly the use case that you need with the right product, and you can build your system around that. But then on the flip side, you're sort of locked in to that vendor, and if that vendor has a challenge, if you've gone down the route of really investing a lot in a certain firewall vendor and they get acquired, or someone acquires them, then that could be a problem. So you're locked into a vendor. And you can operate on-prem with a 100% air gap, but the downside is that you probably are going to be less globally resilient, in that you're kind of eggs in one basket in the aspect of, if you have all your stuff on-prem, you're definitely your local issues with that premises are going to make you less resilient than if you had something that was in the cloud, and therefore you've got better HA and stuff. Okay, so that's just kind of like what I think standard kind of on-prem pros and cons. And then what I'm thinking is we can apply those kind of pros to kind of EPM in a way, and then we can sort of map to see actually if going on-prem with EPM is worth it. Okay, so let's look again. So you have full control and to secure your sensitive data. Okay, but with an EPM, remember that we don't store passwords, so there's very little and no sensitive data to worry about. So in a way, that on-prem benefit is sort of nullified, really. Okay, so you don't have any data sovereignty issues because you have your stuff on-prem, but then remember, we don't really store, or an EPM shouldn't really store any sensitive data. So it's very possible that the data that's left that you haven't kind of screened out is not actually in scope for some data sovereignty kind of requirements. Okay, so we talked about the control of change management. But actually, I think that is a negative on-prem, because the thing is, that, and I remember back to my days in kind of hosting systems and infrastructure design, is that I'm dealing with a certain number of assets of physical infrastructure. I put my policies in place. I got my passwords rotated. The things, they just do the job they have to do. And if I need to update them, I can create a window to do that in 2 weeks' time. If I need to install some new software, I'm doing it, or I'm pushing it out through an MDM, and I have it pushed out at a certain time. There's a certain order to managing infrastructure. Okay, now and that that I could understand if you have a PAM that's dealing with credentials and vaults, that would work. Okay, but for an EPM, we're not talking about servers. Okay, servers don't whinge and complain and moan and download stuff and tinker and try to do things that you don't want them to do. The workforce on those endpoints are constantly changing in their requirements, and new stuff comes out, patches, the user will have something that comes out they need to run to do something in a new version of Blender or whatever. It's constantly changing. And so therefore, change management, those nice 2-week windows that you can pop up for change management that you would have to pop up for an EPM if you also manage that on-prem, you're probably better off having your EPM outside. Well, you would be, because then you don't have to apply the same change management rules that you would do to all that other infrastructure and all that kind of double handling of stuff you're going in there doing, then frequent touches to stuff when you log in and change stuff in the infrastructure. You're probably better off having your EPM outside of your infrastructure, where it's better able to manage the, I say chaos, but I'd also say, agile workforce changes, constant changes. You want to go in and put a rule in. Something's happened today, stick a rule in, get it done. That's kind of like think of it almost like a kind of the on-prem, legacy on-prem is with infrastructure and the PASM is like an oven baking stuff, whereas your EPM, with your PEDA and your EPM is like a frying pan, constantly, cooking stuff every time. It's kind of flash frying. It's kind of like a little bit of chaos going on there. So I think actually looking at the pros and cons here, I can see a definite pro in putting your EPM outside of your on-prem systems. Okay, we talked about vendor selection, for on-prem as a pro, but for EPM, this is not applicable with an agent-based solution. And we talked about the air gap for on-prem. Well, many EPMs, including Admin By Request, can work offline if needed. So you're looking at that and you're kind of like, I don't know if actually it's really worth having a full on-prem solution for an EPM. In fact, actually, this is telling me that I don't want it mixed up with my critical infrastructure. I'd rather have it out, better out than in, I say, with an EPM. Okay, there's me, I'm back again, there I am. Okay, so the next question number 4, which is what makes a good EPM? And well, I think I can probably have a good stab at answering this one. So I'm going to, again, try and find the right camera to show you this on. So which one is that? That would be camera D. Okay, so I think these are the sort of, this is our kind of mantra at Admin By Request. As mentioned earlier, this is the EPM product. It was created from day one. So we've got vast amounts of experience in EPM, and we know what customers like, and so basically this is our kind of mantra as to what we strive to do in making our product. So number one, we want to make our EPM as invisible to the user as possible. This is a very important a feature for an EPM, because remember, you might have maybe 50 servers, 100 servers, but you might have 100,000 users, so you don't want to have to really spend huge amounts of time educating that many users in how to do stuff. Okay, so really the system should go on the endpoint silently. It should take up zero resource. The user shouldn't really know it's there at all. It should be as invisible and as transparent as possible. And if a user does need to perform an action and you have approval enabled, it's a case of the user just gets a form pop up. If I've never even heard of Admin By Request before and I clicked on something and this form came up and I want to install something, it's not difficult. Do you want to run this software? Please enter a reason. Okay, I would like to watch some training videos. Okay, so I click OK. It's totally intuitive. You don't need to learn how to use that. And next thing, number 2, and I think this perhaps is almost as important as number 1, which is the real-time logging and notification. And we all talk about just-in-time, just-in-time admin rights. Okay, so if you're in the business of doing just-in-time admin rights, you better make sure that when the user requests admin, that the request appears, whether it's with us in the portal or using the Slack or the Teams or the ServiceNow or the Jira. So you need to make sure that request turns up here at the right time. Also, and this is critical, is that when it's approved, you need to make sure that that approval arrives on the user's desktop almost instantaneously. Okay, so you click approve, okay, it's approved, and then bingo, the approval is instant. So many systems we look at, they don't do that. They're basically, I've got to give an MFA here, so 1 second. I need to just do this. Okay, good. So many systems that we look at from other vendors, the approval is flaky in that it arrives maybe in 5 minutes, it arrives in 10 minutes, it arrives in half an hour. It's not only is it slow, it's unreliably slow. So you just don't know where you stand. And that's the difference in my view, especially if you're working in kind of critical environments, critical care and all that kind of stuff, between something being useful and completely useless. Approval in 5 minutes, the moment it's gone. It's no, if the emergency is, I've had to do something else. I can't be phoning around, waiting or whatever, asking people. So it's kind of so important that when you're looking at an EPM, that those notifications arrive instantly. And it's something in our product, in Admin By Request, that I'm really proud of. I think it's a major plus. Okay. Easy to configure. Oh, let's do the logging. So the real-time logging as well. So in addition to the notifications arriving instantly, you can see that the logging of the solution is all real-time as well. So you can see that this VLC is running here and it's saying running. If I was to go cancel, and then I was go back to the audit log, you see the running is shown here. And if I hit refresh, you would see that it would change to finish. So that near real-time login, again, that's important because you need to log into your portal and see, right now, real-time, who's doing what, on what computer, with what, and when, and stuff. So that is also critically important. So easy to configure, manage, and deploy. Well, that kind of says it really. I mean, we talked about the legacy PAM and all the problems that come with the huge complexity. You want a system that you can literally pick up and run with from day one. Okay, so you can go, and we're talking about systems that just have on and off buttons. And I'm very kind of, I'm a bit of a nerd, but I can tell you this, that nerds don't like things that are complicated because, especially in stress situations, if I have to go and reconfigure something because something, is happening, I want an interface that is clean and that when I change a configuration, I know exactly what the impact of that change is going to be. Because if I don't, then I'm going to get stressed, and no one likes to be stressed. And actually, I would say that the Admin By Request portal interface is super great to work with, and it's totally non-stressful, and it's great to work with even in the most kind of urgent of situations. And that, I think, because you configure the Admin By Request initially, and you don't log into the portal for maybe a couple of months. And then you need to change something, okay? So you don't need to have to remember how to use the product because it's just easy, okay? And I know a lot of people really value that in our product, and so you should look for that in an EPM. Cross-platform support. Let's go into downloads. Wary of time. We've got about 12 minutes, so I'm going to try and do the hurry up. You can see we have various agents with us. So you've got Windows, Mac, and Linux, and also a separate agent and SKU for Server Edition as well. You don't want a solution that just looks after your Windows systems and have a different solution for Macs or for Linux stuff, right? You don't want gaps because your auditor is not just going to say to you, oh, yeah, forget about those Macs. That's all right, Jeff. We'll just audit your Windows computers. No. So either you're going to have a separate system for Macs and a separate system for Linux, or you want to have an EPM that handles everything in the same audit log with the same request solution with the same configurations. So that is what I'd recommend. Look for a solution that gives you all there's a complete cross-platform support. Okay. Per process, so different sorts of elevation modes for different use cases. This is quite a simple one, but you want to be able to give out different sorts of admin. So for example, we have run as admin that gives you the ability to allow a user to elevate a specific process, just that one process. But then if you have a developer that needs to do lots of elevations, you might want to give them a window of time instead. So rather than do request admin for a specific application, the developer can request admin for an admin session, and it's gonna, I haven't got approval on here, but it's gonna prompt me for a code. So I'm gonna type that in like so, and then you can see, what an admin session looks like. And actually this is the preferred mode for developers. Show them a code of conduct so they behave, and then they get a timer. And then when that timer is running, they can do things that they're allowed to do as admin, but obviously you can still, just like we saw earlier with the Java blocking, we can still block certain things, for example. So I'm allowed to run a command prompt. I'm not sure if I blocked sub-processes on here. Did I block sub-processes? I did block sub. That's very good. Okay, so you can actually block a sub-process from command line, and don't forget that Oracle blocking. So you're not giving developers the keys to the car, but you're just enabling them to do many things in a time session versus a more ad hoc user. You probably want to give them just the run as admin for the single process and the approval of a single process. So all this means that you get the right amount of admin to the right type of use case. And that's critical because your EPM has to handle the minimal admin type of user to the maximum admin type of user and everything in between. So you need to be able to cover all of that. Okay, number 6, built-in inline reputation solution. So yeah, we have in our solution the OpsWat system. So if you are a developer and you are running things as admin that are okay and are safe, we'll let you do that. So for example, the VLC. But if the developer does download something that is a bit suspicious, here's a simulator, you can see what happens. We have the OpsWat blocker kicks in, and basically, that is a multi-engine protection system. It's not installed. We don't install the agents on the system, of course, but we just refer to them doing a call up, and basically, so you get to access something like 30 different AV providers, the hashes from those. So it just means that it's extremely, virtually impossible for a developer to run something with our product that is malicious suspicious, because the OpsWat database would have knowledge of that suspicious file and prevent the user from doing that, and alert security and audit log that. So we can go into the audit log here, go to admin sessions, break open the admin session, and then you can see here, this is what was elevated at the time. So it's also useful to know this, but then we can see, the actual thing, and you can see all the engines that we checked, and you can see there's 2 that flagged up with my simulator. So look for that as well. It's very important. Support for local and remote users. So that's important. So it's possible that you may want to have different types of admin for the users of the computers, but then also if help desk come along, you don't want help desk to have full admin rights either. So you basically revoke the rights from your help desk team, and then you use Admin By Request to just give the help desk team, more rights. And we're a little bit short on time, so there are videos of the support assist functionality, so you can have a look at how that works. But basically, it's an assistance mode, and you start, and then what that does is it then allows the remote supporter who's remoted to the endpoint to basically switch in more privileges with Admin By Request, including the OpsWat protection, so that they can actually help the user. So for example, with support assist enabled, the supporter could then install the Java software, whereas the user couldn't. Okay, and then finally, integration or native remote control functionality. So that would be, the new term for this is kind of RPAM or remote PAM, and for that, with us, we actually have a product called Secure Remote Access that enables the support team to actually perform remote access to the endpoint and screen share from the portal itself. And actually, you can see here, I'm actually using that product to show you the desktop here. So the user would be able to submit a support request, and then using the same request system, the help desk team would then be able to connect, do the screen share, invoke so that's all on the secure remote access, and then do the support assist with the EPM to upgrade the privileges. So you've got both the remote access, the doorway to the endpoint, and then the EPM, which is kind of like the lock, working together nicely, made by the same vendor, as opposed to using maybe like a legacy PAM solution and like TeamViewer, which is, TeamViewer is not at all privilege aware, so that's not a good combo. Right then, we've got 5 minutes. Last question then. How do I know I need an EPM? And this is another good one. I'm going to switch back to this one here. So okay, so I'll go through these pretty quickly. The first thing is quiet users. If your users aren't complaining about not being able to do things, the high likelihood is they've got admin rights, or they've found a way to get admin rights. So I would say that that's probably one telltale sign that you maybe need to consider an EPM. Conversely, if you have a very overworked help desk, perhaps you've revoked those admin rights, and your help desk team is constantly having to do remote sessions to install things on behalf of users, or give out lapsed passwords, or not great things like that, then that's another sign that you might need an EPM, and that could offload a huge amount of work from your help desk team. So the help desk team can actually focus on fixing the real problems, as opposed to going through the kind of constant time-consuming tasks of having to do remote sessions and kind of like that to help users with stuff they could really do self-service for. The use of permanent, partial, or privileged groups. So we've talked about those permanent, partial, privileged groups. So the network configuration operators. That's not great because it's not logged. So really, we want to avoid using those partial privileged groups. And likewise, if you've got if you know there's use of handing out of those Microsoft Labs accounts, so the Microsoft local admin password solution, where you're giving out a temporary full admin password to users. One of the things that's going to happen when you do that is the user's going to say, right, I'm going to help out my help desk people. I'm going to actually create a user myself, so I don't have to bother them next time. And so you'll find that the lapse account will be sent once, and then mysteriously, users will go quiet. And the reason why is they've created themselves their own account using the lapse solution. So that's another thing I would say to look out for. And of course, finally, security compliance requirements. If you have a lot of security, most companies these days would have increasingly need to have various compliance, ISO 27001, in the UK it's Cyber Essentials. You will definitely need to get yourself an EPM, because the auditor is going to come in and is going to want to demand to see who is doing what on what computer with what privileges. Okay, so nicely, that brings us sort of to the end, and 2 minutes, I guess. So again, sorry about the slight wobble with the demo with the agent, but maybe I can edit that out later. Anyway, so if you have any questions, please just fire them over on the chat. We've got a few minutes, and I guess I could probably sing a song or play some backing music, but I won't. I will just casually wait here to see if there are any questions that come in. Maybe what else can I in the meantime? I think I've covered most of those questions, and we'll just see if there are any. No, I don't think we have any questions. So I think we might just wrap it up. Again, I'm just having a little check. Anyway, so I'm off on my holidays, and I'm not going far, but I hope you all have a good summer. Basically, if you do have any questions, send them over, and have a really good one. And any other sort of we'll try and think of, if you've got any suggestions, sorry, for for the next live show, please just send them through, and I'll do my best to cover the topic. I was thinking perhaps I could maybe do one on the inventory system, actually. And if you don't know, the inventory system is basically part of Admin By Request. And I was very surprised on my last trip out to the Far East. We met a few customers, and how many customers really value the inventory system, and the reporting that you get with it. That is sort of, I can go into software inventory aggregation. I can go in. I can basically type in edge, and let's say type in edge. Can I type in edge? And then click on that, and then we get a kind of beautiful little pie chart that shows me in my environment, how many systems are running what version of Edge. I mean, that's really interesting to know from a security point of view, versioning wise, but also if there are issues with plugins or extensions and something, and I know the group of users has a certain issue with certain plugins, this actually would be very handy for troubleshooting. So I might actually do a live show on the inventory, because it is a slightly unsung feature we have, and it seems that many customers value the fact that the data is also very reliable, and it's pretty much real time as well, unlike other inventory systems that you might find in your SCCM or in your Intune, which just has a massive lag that can be a huge problem. But anyway, I think that is all for now. It's been great as ever. We've gone slightly over, but have a really good one, and that's all for now. So toodaloo, cheerio for now. Bye.